Hello, genealogists. This is Craig, and this is my favorite day of the week. It's Book Sunday at Just Genealogy, and unfortunately, we have no books. We have lots coming to us, of course. Don't we always have books coming to us? Sometimes they show up in time for me to talk about them, sometimes they don't. I almost started to talk about a book that came in that I talked about last week. That's how bad it is. Anyway, that said, I thought what I'd do is I'd talk about North Carolina slaves and free persons of color, because we have an excellent set of resources available at Heritage Books to deal with the concept of North Carolina slaves and free persons of color. And also, what is often forgotten is the owners associated with those North Carolina slaves. Lots of people who do research in the South especially fail to take into account that their ancestors' names can be found in places like books about persons of color. We have multiple county volumes. These are done by William Byrd and by John Smith, actually John H. Smith. And they won an award from North Carolina years ago when these came out. They've been out a while, and they are quite useful. We have them for Perquimans, Pasquotank, Iredell, McDowell. Let me go down the list to make sure that the counties are covered. Mecklenburg, Gaston, Union, Stokes, and Yadkin, Height, and Beaufort. Or is that Beaufort? Beaufort. And Burke, Lincoln, Rowan, and 2 volumes for Chowan. Then we also have a set of North Carolina General Assembly session records that deal with slaves and free persons of color, 1709 to 1789. We have a book called Against the Peace and Dignity of the State, which deals with North Carolina laws regarding slaves and free persons of color, and also Native Americans. Now, there are some other books that will be useful to you in your North Carolina research. There is the Free African Americans of North Carolina, Virginia, and South Carolina, 6th edition by Paul Hennick. That's just come out in the past year or so, the new edition, the 6th edition. Then there is also a book by him on list of free African Americans in the American Revolution for Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Maryland, and Delaware. And I also recommend, if you're interested in persons of color and Native Americans in the American Revolution, the DAR on their website has a PDF file that can be downloaded, which is a book that I don't know whether the book is still in print. It's in my library. I forgot. Should have gone and gotten it. But anyway, there is that. There is also a book published by the North Carolina Genealogical Society called In Full Force and Virtue, North Carolina Emancipation Records, 1713 to 1860. And I really think that what they really are is manumission records. These books available at the county level, here's the one for McDowell, and they basically deal with criminal actions, civil actions, petition, ex parte, and other miscellaneous records. They include a glossary of legal terms, and they also have a table of cases for civil and criminal actions within the county during the period in question. There is an excellent introduction to each one of these books that gives you some idea about how you can pursue it. But one of the things that, first of all, recognize that it's very difficult for a person of color to bring a criminal action in North Carolina in this time period. So there are lots of white folk who are bringing criminal actions, and these are also the people that you want to look for and focus on within the county. A resource that lots of people neglect, only because they don't think that their ancestor might be in there. It may also be that they aren't comfortable learning that their ancestor had slaves. Well, lots of our ancestors had slaves. If we got rid of every descendant of every person who ever had a slave in the life of mankind. There might be some people in some isolated places in the far, far north reaches where that they would be the only people left. So that's really, don't apply 21st century morals to 16th, 17th, and 18th century lives. It will only get you in trouble, and your expectations will be very different for you as you do research there if you try to apply modern concepts to colonial actions. So this has been Craig. This has been Just Genealogy, trying to acquaint you. Let me go through that list of counties one more time, just because they are so important. So Perquimans is a separate book. Pasquotank is a separate book. Iredell is a separate book. McDowell is a separate book. Mecklenburg, Gaston, and Union are in a single title. Stokes and Yadkin are in a single title. Hyde and Beaufort are in a single title. Burke, Lincoln, and Rowan are in a single title. Chowan is in 2 volumes. And then don't forget the Understanding the Law Against the Peace and Dignity of the State. That deals with the laws. And then North Carolina General Assembly Session Records, Slaves and Free Persons of Color, deal with what the State Assembly was doing. So this is Craig. This is Just Genealogy. This has been Book Sunday, another Sunday where I don't have any new books. It's just very frustrating because then I have to wander the warehouse and figure out what I should talk about. And I need to get this done because otherwise it won't be up by noon. It's one of those days. Y'all have a great time.